The room was buzzing with quiet chatter. People moved with purpose, checking their phones, talking softly, adjusting papers. At first glance, it looked like any other busy corporate lobby, the kind of place where everyone is focused on their own business, unaware of the small, human stories unfolding around them. And then he arrived. Keanu Reeves. Calm, composed, carrying himself like someone who didn't need attention but still commanded it. He walked in with a gentle smile, his eyes scanning the room just enough to acknowledge the presence of others, yet without being intrusive. He approached the CEO, extending his hand in a polite greeting. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched longer than it should have. And then she did something unexpected. She didn't take his hand. She walked past him, her eyes fixed straight ahead, pretending she hadn't seen it. Her posture was rigid, almost defensive, like she was afraid of showing the tiniest hint of emotion. Keanu paused, just for a second, tilting his head slightly as if to reassess. But he didn't frown, didn't show irritation. He simply waited. A small, polite nod, almost imperceptible, acknowledged the awkwardness without escalating it. But in that moment, everyone in the room felt it. The tension, the silent question hanging in the air. Why would she ignore him? The people nearby glanced at each other, unsure what to make of the scene. Some raised eyebrows. Others shifted nervously. There was no shouting, no confrontation, just a simple human interaction, twisted by unspoken social rules and hidden egos. And yet, it was enough to make everyone pay attention. No one knew why. Was it pride? Was it ignorance? Or was there something else entirely happening behind that composed exterior? Keanu's expression didn't give it away. The mystery of her behavior created an invisible weight in the room. Curiosity sparked in the minds of everyone watching. By the time Keanu moved on, there was a subtle ripple through the crowd. Conversations paused for just a moment longer. Eyes lingered a little more on the CEO, and although no words had been exchanged, a silent story had begun, one that everyone would want to see resolved. What happened next? Why did she ignore one of the most respected and composed figures in the room? That's the question everyone left with, and the reason no one could stop thinking about it. The following day, the scene shifted. The lobby of the corporate building had its usual energy. Receptionists were moving with precision, phones ringing in short bursts, coffee cups clinking as employees carried them back to desks. People were rushing in and out, meetings were beginning, and the hum of business carried on, oblivious to the silent story that had started yesterday. Keanu Reeves entered again, but this time there was a subtle difference. He didn't hurry, he didn't command attention, yet his presence seemed to gently bend the rhythm of the room. People glanced up from their tasks, noticing the calm authority in his walk. It wasn't the Hollywood aura that made heads turn, it was the quiet confidence, the composed demeanor that silently demanded notice. At the center of the room, the CEO sat behind her desk, a figure of poised authority. Her chair was perfectly straight, her hands resting lightly on the desk. She was impeccably dressed, every detail calculated to exude control. But there was something off. The stiffness in her shoulders, the small twitch in her fingers as she typed, the way her eyes darted subtly toward the entrance whenever a new person came in. Yesterday's moment, the ignored handshake, was still fresh in her mind. She was aware of Keanu's arrival immediately. Her posture tensed just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that anyone paying attention could sense the change. She straightened her papers, pretending to adjust the stack rather than revealing the small knot of nerves growing in her chest. Her mind raced. Did anyone else notice? What do I do now? Keanu approached calmly, stopping a few feet away. No sudden movements, no show of impatience. He merely gave a polite nod, scanning the room lightly, observing without intruding. The contrast was clear. He was relaxed, almost casual, while she radiated controlled tension. This subtle juxtaposition made the difference between yesterday's ignored handshake and today's unfolding moment even more striking. Around them, employees and visitors moved through the space, some catching glimpses of the silent standoff. Whispered murmurs began to rise. A receptionist tilted her head slightly, noticing the CEO's unusual rigidity. A young employee paused mid-step, coffee in hand, sensing that something unspoken was happening. The social environment, once ordinary and neutral, had shifted into a stage where everyone was subconsciously aware of a subtle power play. Keanu's calmness wasn't just for show, it was deliberate. By staying composed, he drew attention to the CEO without raising his voice or making any accusations. People around them began to notice micro signals, the slight tightening of her jaw, the way her hands gripped the desk just a little too firmly. And in those tiny gestures, viewers, if watching this unfold, would immediately understand that the CEO was internally reacting to more than just a polite nod being ignored. People respond instinctively to composure versus tension. When someone calm and confident enters a scene where authority is faltering, it creates subconscious curiosity and anticipation. The audience already begins to root for the observed, rather than the observer, because human psychology favors empathy for those under pressure. Keanu didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was a tool, a mirror reflecting the CEO's micro-behaviors. Every slight glance, every tiny movement was magnified by the social environment around them. And as the room continued its usual rhythm, the tension built invisibly, like a pressure slowly rising in a sealed container. Have you ever been in a room where someone's calm presence made everyone else feel the tension? What did you do? The CEO, meanwhile, tried to regain composure. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed her hair, and straightened her posture. These were small human acts of self-preservation, meant to mask the flustered feeling inside. But Keanu's subtle observation caught them all. His eyes flicked just enough to acknowledge the small movements without overreacting. To an outsider, it might have looked like nothing, yet it was the very moment that set the stage for the next day's reversal. The contrast between the busy, seemingly ordinary lobby and the internal drama unfolding made the situation compelling. Employees were unknowingly part of the tension. They weren't just observers. They were witnesses to a microcosm of social power, played out in subtle gestures and calm observation. The story didn't need shouting, confrontation, or dramatic movement. It relied entirely on human behavior, social cues, and the anticipation of a silent payoff. By the end of the scene, the room returned to its normal rhythm externally, but internally everyone who noticed, whether consciously or subconsciously, was anticipating the outcome. They knew, even without knowing exactly why, that yesterday's slight had shifted the balance. Keanu's calm composure had set a stage for something to happen, and the CEO's internal reaction would soon demand resolution. The morning sunlight spilled across the lobby, catching the polished floor and reflecting in the glass walls. It should have been another ordinary day in the world of high-stakes business. But for the CEO, every beam of light felt like a spotlight exposing a flaw she didn't want anyone to notice. The memory of yesterday's ignored handshake lingered like a quiet whisper in the back of her mind. She sat behind her massive desk, fingers lightly tapping on the polished surface. From the outside, she looked calm, professional, composed, in total control of the room. Her tailored blazer, perfectly pressed, and her neatly styled hair reinforced the image of authority. Yet internally, her mind raced. Small thoughts looped relentlessly. Did anyone else see that? Does he even respect me? Why did I act that way? Each question carried a subtle sting of unease. Her body betrayed her attempts at composure. She straightened her spine, only to feel a flicker of tension in her shoulders. She adjusted her bracelet, twisted her pen between her fingers, then pushed it away, pretending she hadn't even noticed it. The tiniest movements, normally unnoticed, now seemed monumental under Keanu Reeves' calm gaze. She could feel him observing without watching, like a gentle weight pressing down on her awareness. Keanu didn't speak. He didn't need to. Every subtle shift in her posture, every fleeting glance toward the door, every moment her eyes flickered with a trace of uncertainty, was silently acknowledged. To anyone else, it might have seemed like nothing. But for her, and for anyone paying attention, it was a mirror reflecting her unease. It was impossible to maintain the image of total control in that quiet spotlight. She tried to regain a sense of normalcy, leaning back slightly and offering a polite nod to a passing employee. Her lips curved into a professional smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The warmth she projected outward was a careful mask over the internal churn of nerves. She wanted to be seen as unflappable, confident, untouchable, but the invisible tension made her feel exposed, as if the calm presence in the room had silently rewritten the rules of authority. People under observation, even subtly, experience stress responses, shallow breaths, slight fidgeting, and unconscious gestures to regain control. It's a very relatable human moment that hooks viewers emotionally. Her hands betrayed her again, this time resting too lightly on the edge of the desk. Fingers curling and uncurling as she tapped a rhythm she didn't even realize. She straightened a stack of papers twice, not to organize them, but to occupy her mind and maintain the illusion of productivity. Each motion was calculated, rehearsed in the mind, yet internally chaotic. Meanwhile, Keanu stood quietly at a respectful distance. His posture remained relaxed, his expression neutral, almost polite. He observed patterns rather than reacting. He didn't glance at the papers she was stacking. He didn't comment on her smile. He simply existed in the space, and the very act of existing created a subtle gravity that shifted the room. This wasn't aggression. This wasn't dominance through confrontation. It was dominance through composure, and it was far more unsettling than any overt action. Around them, employees continued their routines, unaware of the tension spiraling quietly at the center of the room. A few noticed slight inconsistencies, a fleeting glance toward Keanu, the way the CEO's hands lingered over the pen too long, the momentary hesitation in her step as she moved across the lobby. Small details, human details, all building the invisible narrative. The CEO's thoughts became a quiet storm. I have to stay in control. I can't let him see weakness. I can't let them see weakness. The mental repetitions felt endless, but each one made her movements slightly more careful, slightly more deliberate. She straightened her chair again, smoothing her blazer one more time. Every micro gesture became magnified because someone calm, composed, and entirely unaffected was watching. By showing internal conflict, viewers empathize. They see the human side of someone normally portrayed as untouchable. This draws emotional investment and increases watch time because the audience wants to see how this ends. Her eyes flicked toward Keanu again, searching for signs of judgment or criticism, but found only quiet observation. That calm intensity created something powerful: anticipation. She felt an invisible weight on her shoulders, yet there was no confrontation, no shouting, no obvious pressure. Just the understanding that actions or inactions had consequences. A subtle social shift began to occur. People nearby, initially oblivious, started sensing something. The receptionist paused mid-step, realizing the tension. A young executive hesitated near the coffee machine, noticing the CEO's unusually rigid posture. Even small, casual observers felt it. The energy of the room had changed, though the exact reason remained a mystery. The CEO's inner struggle continued. Her mind raced through possible explanations for Keanu's behavior, each scenario more unsettling than the last. Was he disappointed? Am I being judged? Does he think I'm incompetent? And with each thought, her actions became slightly more controlled, slightly more careful, amplifying the contrast between her composed exterior and internal stress. By the time Keanu eventually took a step back, the scene had fully set itself. The public environment, bustling and ordinary on the surface, had become a stage for subtle human drama. The CEO's hidden struggle, combined with Keanu's calm authority, created a tension that everyone, conscious or not, felt. It was a story that didn't need words to captivate. It relied on micro behaviors, human instinct, and the anticipation of what would come next. And in that quiet, tension-filled lobby, one thing was certain: the story was far from over. The slight imbalance, the unspoken challenge, and the silent observation had already begun to lay the groundwork for the reversal everyone would soon witness. The room held its breath, though no one admitted it aloud. The CEO, poised yet internally tense, continued to manage her visible composure. She straightened her blazer for what felt like the 100th time, carefully smoothing every crease. Her hands, which should have rested confidently, twitched subtly as if betraying the storm inside. Keanu Reeves remained calm. He didn't move closer, didn't raise his voice, and didn't react to the previous day's slight. He simply observed. But in his quiet presence, something invisible began to shift. The air in the room felt different. Conversations that had been starting and stopping naturally now slowed as people unconsciously noticed the weight of his gaze. He wasn't imposing himself. He wasn't demanding attention. He was present, that's all. And yet presence alone is powerful. Human psychology responds to calm composure, especially when contrasted against tension and unease. The CEO, normally so unshakable, found herself internally recalibrating. Every micro gesture, her adjusting her papers, tightening her grip on the pen, blinking more often, was subtly amplified in the silent mirror Keanu held for her behavior. Calm presence naturally draws attention and respect. Viewers instinctively understand the dynamic. Someone unbothered commands psychological influence without saying a word. Keanu's eyes shifted just enough to acknowledge her, a subtle nod that didn't demand anything. He continued his casual observation, giving the impression that he was merely noting patterns. And yet, that simple acknowledgement carried weight. It communicated, without words, I see you, and I notice how you act. The CEO felt the subtle pressure of this awareness. Her posture stiffened, not from fear, but from the realization that she was being observed in a way she hadn't anticipated. She tried to maintain her polished professional front, but the smallest details betrayed her. The slight tremor in her hand as she poured coffee, the brief hesitation in her step when she moved toward a folder, every tiny motion was visible to those paying attention. Around the room, employees began to notice something intangible. Some glanced from Keanu to the CEO, sensing a silent dynamic at play. One junior staffer whispered to a colleague, unsure why the CEO looked slightly off. Another paused mid-step, recognizing the subtle tension. The audience, whether watching in person or on screen, could sense the unspoken conversation happening entirely through body language and micro-expressions. Keanu did not intervene directly yet. His strategy was subtle. He observed patterns, waiting for the precise moment to act. And in the meantime, his calmness served as a psychological mirror for the CEO, forcing her to confront the internal reactions she could no longer ignore. If you were in the CEO's position, being observed calmly by someone you respect, how would you feel? What would your body betray first? Her eyes flicked to him once more. The previous day's tension, slight, almost invisible, was now layered with anticipation. She realized that the very act of ignoring a polite gesture had been noticed, and the quiet, controlled manner in which Keanu observed her made her acutely aware of the ripple effect others in the room had begun to pick up on the subtle tension. In that silent moment, the CEO's internal narrative raced. I can't lose composure. I must remain in control. But I can't stop thinking about how calm he is. What does that mean? The human brain reacts strongly to calm authority. It signals competence, confidence, and subtle dominance without aggression. Viewers watching this part of the story are drawn in, anticipating what Keanu might do next, and relating to the universal human experience of being observed in a vulnerable or pressured state. Keanu's presence also subtly influenced others. Employees who had previously been distracted now noticed their own behavior. Conversations were shorter, steps were measured, and attention became more focused. His calm authority created a gravitational pull, one that shifted the social dynamics without a single raised voice. And yet, even in this composed state, there was an unspoken tension, the anticipation of action. The audience senses it instinctively. Something is about to change, and Keanu's control suggests it will be meaningful. By remaining calm and observing, he sets the stage for the upcoming reversal, making the eventual payoff more satisfying, because viewers have been invested emotionally and socially. By the end of this part, the CEO's internal struggle is clear. She has maintained outward professionalism, but her awareness of being observed has altered her behavior. The room, once ordinary and bustling, now carries the quiet weight of anticipation. Every micro-expression, every subtle shift in posture, every slight flicker of the eyes contributes to the silent narrative building toward a pivotal moment. Keanu hasn't acted yet. He hasn't spoken. He hasn't intervened. But in his stillness, he has already changed the game. The silent authority he projects forces reflection, recalibration, and awareness both in the CEO and in those watching. People respond instinctively to calm authority, especially when contrasted with tension. The audience empathizes with the observed, increasing engagement and retention. Small, believable details make the story feel real and relatable. Even in a high-profile scenario, the lobby had settled into an unusual rhythm. Externally, everything looked normal. Phones buzzed, heels clicked across the polished floor, the hum of conversation filled the space. But beneath the surface, an invisible story was unfolding. The CEO, sitting behind her desk, was the center of a quiet storm, and Keanu Reeves' composed presence had shifted the social dynamics in a way no one could ignore. Employees began noticing the tension before they understood it. A receptionist paused mid-step, tilting her head toward the CEO with a subtle frown. Two colleagues whispered, glancing quickly at the CEO and then at Keanu. Their voices were low, almost conspiratorial, as if they didn't want to draw attention but couldn't resist acknowledging the subtle imbalance in the room. Even the interns, who normally moved through the space like ghosts, sensed that something was off. There was a weight to the air, a quiet pressure that made them pay closer attention than usual. The CEO's internal struggle was palpable. Her fingers drummed lightly against the desk, betraying a nervous rhythm she could not control. She adjusted her chair, smoothed her blazer, and briefly looked away, as though avoiding Keanu's gaze could erase the tension. But Keanu didn't look directly at her. He observed patterns, small movements and subtle gestures, all without a word. The contrast between his calm and her tautness amplified the suspense. When someone calm is in a space where another person is tense, the audience instinctively reads every gesture. This mirrors real life experiences, making viewers connect deeply and anticipate outcomes. Keanu's subtle presence had a ripple effect. The employees who had once been distracted by their phones or conversations now found themselves watching. A junior assistant, carrying a stack of files, slowed his pace, careful not to stumble or attract attention. He noticed the CEO's slight tightening of her jaw and realized she was under stress. Another colleague, mid-sentence with a client on the phone, paused, her words faltering slightly as she unconsciously mirrored the tension around her. The social ecosystem of the room had shifted, almost imperceptibly yet dramatically. The CEO's inner dialogue raced. I need to maintain control. I can't let him see weakness. I must appear confident. But why is he so calm? Each thought added to the tension. She tried to focus on her computer screen, pretending she was working, but her fingers hovered over the keyboard, waiting for a safe distraction. Every small gesture, the way she brushed her hair behind her ear, the subtle tapping of her foot, was amplified under the silent gaze of someone unshakably composed. The crowd of employees had become unwitting witnesses to a silent drama. Their observations, though unconscious, created social pressure. In human psychology, social proof and tension are powerful. When one person's behavior shifts, others instinctively respond. Every subtle sign of discomfort in the CEO was noticed, and in turn, the observers began adjusting their behavior. Conversations were quieter, movements slower, and attention sharper. The room's energy shifted from ordinary business hum to an almost theatrical stage of silent anticipation. Have you ever been in a room where tension builds without anyone saying a word? How did it make you feel? The CEO's attempts at composure grew more calculated. She straightened a stack of papers, deliberately choosing one to adjust just enough to appear productive. She smiled at a passing employee, but the gesture lacked warmth. Each calculated action was an attempt to regain the narrative she felt slipping away. And yet, every movement was mirrored, observed, and subtly commented on by Keanu's composed presence. Keanu's subtle micro-actions amplified the suspense. A slight shift in his weight, a calm glance in her direction, the slow tilt of his head, nothing overt, but everything meaningful. To the casual observer, it was subtle body language. To the CEO, it was an invisible weight pressing on her. And to the audience watching, it was the silent signal that something important was about to happen. Small, human details became dramatic cues. The receptionist's hand paused over a ringing phone. The intern's eyes widened slightly. Even the janitor, quietly vacuuming a distant corner, paused, sensing an unusual energy in the space. These details reinforced tension without words. Viewers experience this tension psychologically because it mirrors real-life social dynamics, the anticipation, the awareness of being observed, the unspoken stakes. The CEO's internal pressure continued to mount. She straightened her chair once again and adjusted her pen. The hum of the lobby no longer felt neutral. It felt heavy, charged. Each micro-movement became exaggerated in her perception. The silent observation from Keanu had created a feedback loop. Her anxiety fueled his calm authority, and his calm authority magnified her internal struggle. Social pressure triggers instinctive reactions, fidgeting, micro-adjustments, and heightened awareness. This engages viewers because it mirrors the subtle dramas they encounter in real life. Finally, the CEO realized she could no longer ignore the situation. Every instinct screamed at her to regain control, yet the calm, measured presence across the room denied her that power. The social environment, the employees, the ambient observations, the silent tension was now part of the narrative. It was no longer just about a handshake. It was about authority, perception, and the quiet power dynamics that humans navigate daily. The stage was set. Employees and onlookers had become witnesses, their curiosity growing. The CEO's struggle had escalated to a silent crescendo, creating anticipation in everyone present. They sensed a shift was imminent. Something was about to change, and they didn't know how or when. That tension, the slow burn of unspoken social drama, ensured the audience remained glued to the moment, waiting for resolution. In that charged atmosphere, Keanu maintained his composure, observing, subtle and deliberate. He was the eye of the storm, and his calm highlighted the CEO's internal chaos. By creating this contrast, he forced reflection, subtly influencing both the CEO and the room of witnesses. The tension had reached its peak without a single word spoken, preparing the perfect setup for the eventual action and reversal that would leave viewers both satisfied and emotionally engaged. The morning had begun like any other, calm, ordinary, filled with the subtle hum of office life. But by now, the lobby was a stage, every movement charged with unspoken anticipation. The CEO, once confident and in control, had been subtly unraveled by the quiet, composed presence of Keanu Reeves. Every micro, gesture, every twitch of her hand, every controlled adjustment of her blazer had told the story long before anyone spoke a word. And then it happened. The very next day, a message arrived for Keanu, a formal request from the CEO herself. She wanted a meeting. Her words were polite, carefully crafted. But the subtext was unmistakable. Yesterday's slight had created a personal urgency, and she could no longer ignore the weight of observation. Keanu read the message and, with his characteristic calm, simply nodded. He didn't rush. He didn't overreact. His composure amplified the effect of the request. He arrived at the meeting room at the appointed time, greeting the staff and CEO with quiet respect. His presence alone was a signal that this was serious, yet handled with dignity. The CEO entered, her posture different from yesterday, no longer rigid, yet still cautious. The internal tension remained, but it had shifted from defensive anxiety to careful humility. She extended her hand, this time without hesitation. The subtle act, simple as it seemed, carried a weight far greater than any verbal apology could have conveyed. Small gestures carry immense social weight. Recognition, acknowledgement, or apology through action triggers emotional payoff in both participants and observers. Viewers recognize and empathize with these micro moments naturally. Keanu accepted the handshake with a polite nod and a brief smile. There was no fanfare, no exaggerated reaction, just the quiet acknowledgement that the situation had been noticed, addressed, and resolved. And in that simplicity lay the shock. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, not through confrontation, but through composure and social intelligence. The CEO's internal narrative raced. I misjudged him. I miscalculated. I need to make this right. Her body language subtly softened. She maintained eye contact, leaned slightly forward, and spoke in measured tones. Each word was carefully chosen, each gesture deliberate, revealing a new layer of vulnerability. Yet there was dignity in her approach, a recognition that respect could be earned through acknowledgement, not intimidation. Employees and witnesses in the room noticed immediately. The junior staffer who had paused mid-step yesterday now smiled subtly, seeing the resolution unfold. Colleagues who had whispered earlier now observed quietly, understanding the invisible power shift that had occurred. The office, once a neutral backdrop, had become a canvas on which human behavior and social dynamics were painted in vivid detail. The CEO's humility was brief but effective. She expressed her desire to collaborate and learn from the interaction, her tone calm but sincere. Keanu responded with the same composed demeanor, acknowledging her words without overstatement. The room, now a witness to this subtle shift in authority and understanding, seemed to exhale collectively. The tension that had been building silently for 2 days had found its resolution, not in conflict, but in mutual recognition of composure and respect. This moment, quiet and understated, is what makes the story memorable. The audience doesn't witness shouting, drama, or exaggerated confrontation. Instead, they experience a realistic social reversal. The CEO, once in apparent control, now demonstrates humility, acknowledging the quiet power Keanu wielded through presence alone. It's a payoff that resonates deeply because it mirrors situations viewers have faced in their own lives, times when quiet observation or patience change the dynamics of a relationship. Psychological payoff occurs when anticipation meets resolution. The brain rewards narrative closure, especially when the resolution aligns with human empathy and fairness. This keeps viewers engaged and increases emotional investment. The CEO's behavior continued to reflect this shift. She asked questions instead of issuing directives. She listened actively, nodded thoughtfully, and even allowed herself the small grace of a brief smile, an admission that she had learned something important. Keanu remained the calm center, guiding without dominating, allowing the CEO and witnesses to witness her own internal transformation. Observers, both in the room and in the minds of viewers, felt satisfaction. The tension that had been building across days, silently conveyed through micro-behaviors, was resolved with dignity and realism. No one lost face, no one was humiliated, yet the lesson was clear: composure, patience, and quiet authority can have far greater impact than overt displays of power. Finally, the meeting concluded. The CEO walked away with a newfound respect, both for Keanu and for herself, having navigated her internal struggle and emerged aware of her own behavior. The employees returned to their routines, now subtly altered by what they had witnessed. And viewers, having followed the tension and silent dynamics, experienced a satisfying payoff that is both believable and emotionally resonant. The meeting room slowly emptied, leaving behind a quiet sense of completion. The CEO, who had walked in with cautious composure, now carried herself differently, more measured, more reflective, and with a subtle lightness in her posture. The tension that had shadowed her movements for days was gone, replaced by an awareness of what had truly mattered: respect, humility, and human connection. Keanu Reeves remained calm as always. He didn't linger unnecessarily or draw attention to the outcome. Instead, he allowed the moment to conclude naturally, letting the CEO and the witnesses absorb the impact themselves. His quiet authority had done more than assert influence. It had created a learning moment, both for the CEO and for the silent observers who had been following every micro, expression, and gesture. Resolution works psychologically because viewers experience closure. When anticipation is followed by realistic, human outcomes, the brain rewards the story emotionally, increasing satisfaction and retention. The CEO walked back to her desk with a newfound sense of awareness. She straightened her papers not out of tension, but with calm deliberation. A faint smile touched her lips, a recognition of both her own growth and the subtle lesson she had received. Her gestures were no longer hurried or calculated. They were measured, intentional, and grounded in reflection. Around the room, employees noticed the change immediately. Conversations resumed, but with a different energy, more attentive, more respectful. The interns who had paused mid-step yesterday now smiled quietly, recognizing the quiet power of observation and patience. Even casual onlookers in the lobby carried with them a sense that something meaningful had transpired, without a word being broadcasted. The story's moral became clear, not through lecture or speech, but through lived example. Respect, attentiveness, and composure are powerful. Small gestures, like a polite handshake or calm observation, can shift dynamics more effectively than aggression or confrontation. The CEO had learned this subtly, and the audience watching had learned it vicariously, creating a shared human experience. Have you ever experienced a moment where quiet composure or patience changed someone's behavior completely? Share your story in the comments. Keanu's presence remained a reminder that leadership is not about intimidation or spectacle. True influence comes from awareness, empathy, and the ability to act when necessary, without forcing the moment. By letting the CEO recognize her own misstep and respond with humility, he had orchestrated a shift in perception that felt entirely natural and earned. The employees, now witnesses to the resolution, carried subtle lessons with them, noticing micro behaviors, understanding social dynamics, and appreciating the impact of calm authority. Even the CEO's internal reflection offered a teachable moment. She had learned to respect patience, composure, and deliberate observation over ego or assumption. The story closes with quiet empowerment. The CEO is supported, not humiliated. She is aware of her actions, and she has the opportunity to act with greater understanding in the future. Keanu's intervention was minimal yet effective, demonstrating that influence does not require aggression, only awareness, composure, and timing. The audience experiences the satisfaction of a tension-filled arc being resolved without dramatized spectacle, making the story feel believable and human. If you believe small actions and calm composure can make a bigger impact than aggression, type RESPECT in the comments. Share where you're watching from, and tell us if you've ever witnessed a quiet moment like this. Finally, the room returns to its normal rhythm. Phones buzz, heels click, and conversation resumes. But underneath the ordinary exterior, everyone carries the story's invisible lesson. Power is subtle, influence is measured, and respect, earned or given, is far more impactful than force. The payoff is both satisfying and human, leaving viewers with a sense of closure and inspiration. Stories that resolve tension realistically, with human insight and subtle moral lessons, resonate emotionally and psychologically. Including a CTA tied directly to the moral maximizes engagement while keeping the story authentic. The CEO had learned her lesson. The employees had witnessed it. And viewers, whether imagining themselves in the lobby or reflecting on similar real-life experiences, walked away with one clear takeaway: quiet respect and composure change dynamics in ways words or force never can.